So the guy we're waiting on as of Thursday morning while we're doing the show is Aaron Rodgers. Fascinating that it appears, at a minimum, the Steelers and Giants want him and they're waiting on his decision. The Jets took a $49 million dead cap hit to move on from him.
Yeah.
And yet the Steelers and Giants are waiting on him. I guess I have this question. Are we sure, Greg, he's better than Russell Wilson? I mean, I
Yes.
called that game on the radio last year. Jets and Steelers. Russell Wilson outplayed him in that game. I'm just curious about that.
I can tell you from a tape perspective, we are sure that he's better than Russell Wilson. I don't think that's a question. I think the larger question, and I don't normally get into this, but I heard someone else speak about this, so I'm basically going to paraphrase that. Someone who's in the know and knows more than I do about the inner workings of all this with teams. But I think if you sign Aaron Rodgers, you've got to sit down. And as I said, I'm paraphrasing what was said to me. You've got to sit down with him. He's got to be in your off-season program. He's got to be in your building. He's got to be part of the team from day one. He can't just show up. So I think you have to have that conversation. Look, I would assume he wants to get back and try to win a championship. That's why he's still playing football. The guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer. So, I think, but there's no question from a tape perspective that he's better than Russell Wilson.
It's funny because it's now been a week. We didn't even get to talk about DK Metcalf in depth last week because we just didn't know who would be throwing him the ball. And yet again, we don't know who's going to be throwing him the ball. Maybe it is Mason Rudolph, who, as it stands right now on their roster, would be the week 1 starter. I would imagine they maybe use that number 21 overall pick for a quarterback. NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah in his most recent mock draft just had Jackson Dart going at number 21 overall. I'm not sure if that's rumors or just because he also looks at the roster and says there's no way this team can pay DK Metcalf $150 million and then think that Mason Rudolph is the guy who's going to help them get by on offense. So right now for the Steelers, it's just very confusing what the entire approach is under Tomlin.
So, boy, there's a lot there. It just occurred to me, by the way, John, that as we're recording this, first of all, the 3 quarterbacks that are most notable in free agency, Geno Smith, Justin Fields, Sam Darnold, all current or former New York Jets. And, when Rodgers eventually, we think, signs somewhere, there's a very real possibility this year that there are 3 New York Jets quarterbacks that are top 20 in the NFL, and the Jets don't have any of them. I mean, that's like a real possibility. Speaking of New York quarterbacks, speaking of confusing situation, Aaron Rodgers, still without a team here, more than a week into free agency. I guess there are some reports that he wants to go to the Vikings, but the Vikings aren't sure whether or not they want him. There's some thought that maybe he might retire. Certainly the Steelers and the Giants are both, as we're recording this, waiting on him. Where's the best fantasy landing spot? I mean, pretty clearly the Vikings, if he would go there, do you think, John?
It has to be a situation with a good offensive line, since we saw last year that, at least while the Jets were still in contention for the playoffs, he was terrified of taking hits, which is why we talked about this last year as well on some of our matchup previews, that opposing defensive coordinators knew they didn't have to send extra pass rushers. Like, if you can get there with 4, Aaron Rodgers is guaranteed to dump the ball off and limit the explosiveness of their offense. And so it needs to be with a good line who can actually hold up in pass protection, and the Vikings showed just last year with Sam Darnold they can do that. So I think it would be a good 1-year bridge for Aaron Rodgers. The issue also for anyone who brings him in, there are definitely questions about whether he would be the guy you even want to be the mentor or pass on tutelage to the younger developing person behind him, just because of who he has become in locker rooms, most recently tearing the Jets down from the top down. So I think we're in a situation where it's mid-March and no team outside of the Steelers and Giants reportedly have shown interest. I just think that's kind of where we are with Aaron Rodgers' career. It seems crazy, I know, that just 2 years ago, back-to-back MVPs, otherworldly plays, and then the last 2 full years he's played, his final season with Green Bay, and last year, a below-average quarterback. But that's what happens. These things happen in your careers overnight, unfortunately. And so I just think we're at a situation where Aaron Rodgers is best served as a backup, but locker rooms are definitely questioning, do they want to bring that kind of guy in?
Yeah, I think that's fair. What about Russell Wilson, John?
If we were talking about his situation in free agency after his first handful of starts with the Steelers last year, it would definitely be an entirely different conversation, and that includes going back to Pittsburgh. The issue is we're not, and we saw the last month of the season when the Steelers truly became one of the worst offenses in the league and then got to the playoffs and got motorboated in the first half of the year, just in the first half of that game, just run over entirely by the Ravens and knocked out of the playoffs altogether. And so I think a lot of teams saw that last month and a half from Russell Wilson, which was similar, unfortunately, to the Russell Wilson that was playing in Denver. And also we're questioning, do we want this guy on the team, since he's someone who I think he'd be a fine character to be a backup, just like Justin Fields, and Justin Fields supported him when he got into the starting lineup. But at the same time, again, would you rather spend that backup quarterback spot developing a younger guy? And is Russell Wilson efficient enough now to bridge you over until that younger guy's ready to step in? So it's a similar conversation with Aaron Rodgers, in that I think teams are also, again, questioning, like, what purpose does Russell Wilson have on this roster if we were to sign him?
What about, I got to ask you, it's not too far from Indy, Cincinnati. Do you think that the Bengals paid both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins as a direct reaction to your quote last week about how frugal they are and they've been that way for 30 years?
I think they did it as a direct reaction to keep Joe Burrow happy. And let's face it, you've got to keep your franchise quarterback in a good place. So I think how often you're going to have a franchise quarterback, you got to go ahead and keep his weapons there.
Got it. Okay. And then the last NFL thing, unless there's something else that's jumped out to you over the course of the last week or so, and in terms of any of the other moves that were made, the last one that really jumps out to me, I'm curious. It feels like there are multiple teams that are interested in Aaron Rodgers and or Russell Wilson. It feels like Russell Wilson's the backup plan for the Steelers and the Giants if they don't get Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers reportedly wants to be in Minnesota with the Vikings. I got 2 Aaron Rodgers related questions. One is, what's the difference in how you feel about the Vikings if they got Aaron Rodgers to start versus going with J.J. McCarthy, the youngster who didn't play at all as a rookie with the injury?
Only the Vikings know how good J.J. McCarthy is. It's a great unknown, right? So both those quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, I would have rated right around to start the season as an average quarterback. Now, at some point, Aaron Rodgers is going to fall off the cliff, like Favre did. When quarterbacks get to be 41, it's not unusual that they start the season okay, and at the end of the year, they can't play a lick. So I would much prefer Russell Wilson, but I really don't know about McCarthy and what his progress has been so far.
Blank canvas, Sheck. It sounds like, based on Art Rooney II, that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And I would like to just get your thoughts, reaction to this possibility.
First things first, Ross, I'm a gentleman, as you know, first and foremost. And so that requires me to extend a belated congratulations to you and all Eagles fans out there. You did it. You got a second Lombardi. Good for you. And a little bit of bitterness, a little bit of sour to inject into these proceedings here. I am also doing my what the ifs for Le Batard, and I just did one recently. You can track down on Le Batard's YouTube page and otherwise on social media about what if back in 2020 we had a redraft. I don't know if you heard the draft is approaching in 2025, but let's go back half a decade. And what if another NFC contender beat the Eagles to their superstar quarterback? That's the question I tackled. Now, when I bring up the what the if, that reminds of the conversation we had about a decade ago. At the time, we were struck by the fact that the Green Bay Packers were in the midst at that point, I think maybe 25 years in or thereabouts. They had never worse than the second or third best quarterback in the QB league, Brett Favre leading into Aaron Rodgers. And somehow that only amounted to the same number of Lombardi trophies as the Baltimore Ravens got via Dilfer and Flacco. Unsatisfying ultimately. And so let's start there in this evaluation. The brand name Aaron Rodgers is grand. First ballot Hall of Famer, one of the most gifted, if not the most passers in the history of people to play pro football and all of that. But in his last 25 games, he's turned the ball over 34 times. And he's 42 years of age. And he's a weirdo, but not the same kind of weirdo that Tom Brady is. Tom Brady is a guy who, despite the fact that he can chug a beer faster than anyone else on the planet, is predisposed to avocado shakes and such. Everything in preparation for a pro football game when he was in his early 40s. That ain't Aaron Rodgers as far as I can tell. He's not that level of committed to ball, and which is a bad thing because Brady, Warren Moon, I think when he was 41, had a good season for the Seahawks. Brett Favre had that one great year for the Vikings, and then that's it. That's the amount of 40-year-olds thriving in the QB league. So why Aaron Rodgers is set to offset that, I have no idea, especially given the fact that we've seen him playing in his 40s for the Jets, and he wasn't good. This is the brand name Rodgers is one thing. The reality of 42-year-old Rodgers is another thing. Witness the fact that in the QB league, where every team is going to evaluate QBs who are available, the conclusion from 30 NFL teams is we don't want this cat. It's you and the Giants. Deja vu sounds a lot like 1 year ago when only the New York Giants were interested in Russell Wilson as a possible starter. How did we get into this mess, man?
Man, you just made a lot. I mean, a lot of really good points. You know what I think is so interesting, and I thought of this as you were talking about the 40-year-old quarterback things, and maybe it's because they play longer, but man, you could visually see when Peyton Manning, who by the way won a Super Bowl, even though he was this way.
I think he would concede that that wasn't him winning it. He was a passenger on that one.
Yes, Drew Brees, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. I'm thinking about the guys that are like first ballot Hall of Famers that have played late 30s, early 40s. And it feels like, it probably wasn't, but it feels like overnight they went from like top 5, top 10 guys to, you know what? They're actually not good. We're not allowed to say it out loud because they've been so good for so long. But they're like Drew Brees and Peyton Manning, they could not throw a ball at the end. And Sean King said yesterday, and I thought he made a great point, Shaq, that Aaron Rodgers' athleticism has fallen off a cliff. And that was always a big part of who he was, right? His ability to buy time, his ability to make throws on the move, that's over. Like that's gone for him. And he's not, which is the difference, by the way, between him and Brady. That was never part of Brady's game. That was never an element to Brady's game, but it is a big part of Rodgers' game. So it's kind of like Russell Wilson. He's not the athlete he used to be. So these guys are not going to be even close as good as they used to be when they lose the thing that made them the best. You know, for Peyton Manning and Brees, it was their arm. For the other guys, their athleticism. Brady somehow didn't lose his arm, and he never had the athleticism.
You just said it exactly right, and it marries up neatly with a conversation I had with one Maurice Jones-Drew, name drop, a few years ago when Frank Gore was having his late career. run with the Niners and thriving. I said, it's weird that is going on. How do you explain that? And it was exactly what you just said. He said Frank Gore never depended on his wheels. It was never about high-end speed. So he didn't have that to lose. It's sort of like Bane talking to Batman. Oh, you think you were born into it? I was born into that. That's Tom Brady. Tom Brady was like always, I'm a better athlete than schnooks like Dave Dameshek out on the street, but I can't compete with these superhero guys. But that was true for Brady when he was 24. So there was nothing to lose. He just got better at, pre-snap, at the line of scrimmage, I'm throwing the ball there kind of stuff. That only got better as he aged. When you are Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, you can float Ben Roethlisberger's name in there when you're dependent on Cam Newton. I don't think, as I've said before, I think it's a fascinating place that we've reached in pro football, which is that we hold up Dan Marino by himself as this sad case of like, man, he's one of the all-time greats, and he never got it done. By, 10 years from now, Lamar Jackson and or Josh Allen are going to be joining him because those guys do not have the same window like we talk about here that Tom Brady's going to have or had, or that Aaron Rodgers. It's a more limited window, and so I think, but then the devil's Dameshek of it all is that, LeBron is 40 and playing at a level that his predecessors didn't. Sidney Crosby in his late 30s, Alex Ovechkin, 39 years of age. So maybe 21st century, self-care or whatever leads you, allows for you to play deeper into your career. But again, back to what I said 10 minutes ago, does Aaron Rodgers strike you as the sort of cat who's taken full advantage of all those advantages that guys didn't have a quarter century ago? No, he's in Egypt tripping balls. I don't think so I don't think that those advances necessarily apply to him.
So this is the next thing. Art Rooney II said it's heading in that direction. Something like thought we'd be there by now. We can logically, what are all the reasons why he could possibly have not signed with the Steelers yet, right? One of them could be more money. That doesn't appear to be the case. One of them could be waiting to see if some other team changes their mind. One of them could be waiting until after the draft to see how that plays out. One of them could be he's figured out that it's good for his ego and or post-football ambitions, whatever those may be, to not be signed, for people to be talking with him about him. Because no matter which one you go down, no matter which reason it is for why he hasn't signed with the Steelers yet, it's not a good look for the Steelers. It's not a good look for Rodgers either. No matter, let's be as let's give every opportunity. It's still not a good thing.
Yeah, it definitely has a pathetic whiff to it that feels like, and it's a little bit funny when we bask in the reflected glory of our teams. And so this is beneath my Steelers. Maybe sounds a little pretentious and silly, but it should feel that way to Art too. I think that he should acknowledge that this is unsteelery. As a fan 3,000 miles away from Pittsburgh right now, maybe it's a little silly for me to be doing that. But I mean, I'm surprised that R2 is okay with it, but I don't think you mentioned the two that I think are the reasons why. One of the two is the reasons why Rodgers has yet to sign. One is that he thinks that the Vikings are in play, in which case, if he's gotten that from O'Connell, then it's going to require the Vikings going to, in spring, getting out onto the field to evaluate where the guy is. I mean, that would make some sense to me if O'Connell on down are looking at the team and saying we feel like we're kind of Super Bowl ready, we can contend this year. so long as our sophomore QB, who's really a freshman QB, is ready to roll. And, we don't know if he is as far along as we thought. Then Rodgers becomes, I guess, a imperfect fail-safe for you. And then, by the way, that makes it more embarrassing if the Steelers have any sense that that's the case. Like, well, just let us know if the Vikings don't work out. They're unproven QB who you might have to replace. If that all falls apart for you in one of the two Twin Cities, we're here for you, Aaron. Is such a pathetic posture for Mike Tomlin to be taking here. And that's exactly what he's doing here. And by the way, even more embarrassing, given the fact that this is a sequel to last year when they did the exact same thing, chasing somebody else's hero. The Pittsburgh Steelers are not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, willing to accept and desperate to accept, or at least they didn't used to be. Oh, we know you're the Foxborough icon, but come on down here and use us as your vessel to prove something to your haters or to validate the chip on your shoulder and why you're still great, Tom. We don't care, just use us. That's not what the Steelers should be about. And by the way, that's a fraudulent approach if you think that Aaron Rodgers at age 42 is about to step in there and do that. So that's one side of it. The other one is the more practical straight line, which is how has Aaron Rodgers sort of been laundered to the extent that he has been and still seems like a viable sort of character is his appearances on Pat McAfee. And Pat McAfee, I don't know if you heard, he's a Yinzer through and through, and talks to Aaron all the time on his show. It makes all the sense in the world if you're running a show that announcing in your hometown the new starting quarterback happens to be the guy who's on your show all the time. For McAfee, a major win. For Rodgers, I think that, like I say, McAfee's ability, especially on the banks of the Three Rivers, to launder Aaron Rodgers. Because I'm telling you, man, I was just there anecdotally. I talked to people from all range, different walks of life, different types of people, but everybody I bounced off of, you make a passing remark about like, hey, Yinza, Rodgers signed yet? You make that comment. They go, oh, God, please no. Please don't let that happen. That is going to be the prevailing opinion. McAfee might be able to salvage that a little bit, but the idea that Pittsburgh is going to swoon, especially a year after just watching someone else's hero try to play mercenary in Russell Wilson, it feels like a repeat. It feels very much like Mike Tomlin has mistaken himself for Sly Stallone trying to make a sequel to The Expendables. Like, okay, we're not going to win any trophies, Oscars, Lombardis, or otherwise doing this, but you know what? We old fellas still can still have some value. Let's show it to everybody, Aaron or Russ or whatever your name is, because I have something to prove. I once was at NFL Honors on the red carpet, and I was about to interview Rex and Rob Ryan, who had just been hired by the Buffalo Bills. Rex is the head coach, Rob brought in as the DC. And as we were about to start yapping, up walked Ray Lewis. And Ray Lewis, they made eye contact, and there went the interview in favor of them hugging each other for the next 90 seconds or so. All three of them just hugging like, the league doesn't know what's coming, do they? No, they don't, but they're going to find out, aren't they? Yeah, they are. They're going to find out. Oh, they don't know what's coming. They're about to learn, though, right? That was all of the dialogue for 90 seconds that I paid witness to. Then the three of them walked off, and I never got the interview. But I think that's Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers right now. Like, let's show everybody we still got something to prove. It's not exactly the point, because does any of this end with a Super Bowl run in 2025 with Aaron Rodgers? Of course not. So anyway, I think Aaron Rodgers, if he isn't waiting out the Vikings, then he is going to, wouldn't you know it, serendipity, Pat McAfee has a live show next Wednesday in Pittsburgh. It makes all the sense in the world that somebody, Tomlin, Khan, or somebody said like, hey, Art, Aaron's going to sign. It's a done deal, but he would just prefer to be able to make the announcement in a public way. This way, it's better for him and his brand, and Art too. It's like, okay, whatever, as long as we got our quarterback. I think that's the most likely reason why Rodgers hasn't signed yet. It's probably 98% of the way a done deal if it's not ink on paper. it's an agreement, and now they're just waiting to make the announcement so McAfee gets to do it. And I think, like I say, if not the Steelers seeing the value in trying to massage public opinion on the banks of the Three Rivers, I bet Rodgers understands the value of riding in on McAfee's back instead of just showing up and saying, here I am, Three Rivers. I think he's better off to do it on McAfee's back.
Wow, that is fascinating. I hadn't thought of that. You make a really good point, which is that, you know, they're not going to win. Like, what's the upside here? Maybe winning a playoff game, but it's hard to picture them beating Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Mahomes or any of those guys. So it's doing a lot of bending to try to get a guy that, I don't know, marginally gives you a chance. You know, think about also, Shek, how humbling this has to have been for Rodgers to have like all these, like the Steelers wanted Stafford. Then they were in on Darnold. They wanted Fields. Like, imagine being Aaron Rodgers and you know the team you're going to tried to get all these other guys first, which is very humbling for him. But maybe that's why he's making them sweat now. Maybe that's why he's making them wait.